Should you make a video game? As a professional in thinking about this idea, this is what I've thought about for years. I've tried again and again using different programs and ideas, but I could never see it through. Well, until recently. I've spent an excessive amount of time being an idea guy. Not that I didn't want to be more, it just felt so out of scope, especially since I didn't know how to keep ideas within a reasonable, scope. So when I saw a video by Hakita of Ultrakill, I got a plan. 3 games of the summer. The idea is simple. Before you delve into bigger projects, start with 3 smaller projects. One that takes 2 weeks, one that takes 1 week, and one that takes a month. Why is it like this? Well, Hakita probably said it better, so you should go watch that video if you want more detail, but the idea is to practice your ability to set a reasonable scope, to test your development abilities in all fields and learn how to work with other people in areas you're not as strong in. For my first game, I wanted to get a sense of what this looks like. Now, this is technically my first games, but I haven't not made games before, if that makes any sense. The thing is, I've gotten pretty far with small prototypes and messing around just to see how systems tick. When I originally started out, I tried Unity, but my dinky little laptop didn't handle it fantastically. I switched to Godot, and it is much more lightweight, making it way easier to get started. And the colors are nicer on the eyes, I'm sorry, the gross gray does nothing for me. So yes, this was my first game, but I've tried making stuff in Godot for about 2-ish years. I'm saying this because if I did not have this prior knowledge, I'd have had to dial it back even further than I thought I did. If you have 0 experience with programming, this may in fact be hell. It genuinely can be so frustrating to learn a new language and how you're supposed to make the systems tick. I suppose that means my endeavors in the past weren't entirely in vain, but anyway, let's jump into my experience making the 9 puzzle. So what do you even do for your first game? I first thought I could do Snake, but Zelda, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I decided to go with this one idea where it was a small game where each area is 9x9 and then you could go through each area and it would be a bigger 9x9 and it could be a 9x9 Inception, where you end up solving 9 small puzzles in a short little area. I simplified and changed a lot, but the remnants of the original idea are still there. I thought this would be just the right size for 2 weeks. I was 75% correct, but if I was going in with no experience in any of these fields, it would have been 25% correct, and that's a failing grade for sure. The thing is, laying it out was easy enough, though at this point I was uncertain if I was still going to stick with the 9x9 idea. I first had to, program it in. I hadn't really done top-down movement before, so this was kind of a new experience for me. I watched the beginning of a tutorial on it, then got bored and left with just player movement. The problem with tutorials is that they're typically right, but you might develop your game in a different way for different reasons, and they work for a very rigid purpose. So it's probably better to learn the systems themselves by just messing around with the code to actually understand what's going on. In terms of assets, I made the player asset first using Sprite. I barely know anything about pixel art, let alone pixel animation, so I just kind of tried to make it look alright. I wanted the character to be vague, but still human. Well, about as human as I can get with 16x16 sprites. I was gonna do 9x9, but that sounded silly, so I didn't. I used somebody else's sprite sheet as a blueprint for what I was supposed to do or how I was supposed to make them look, and I think it turned out about as alright as I could do at that stage. Next up was dialogue. Now, I started to work on a dialogue system, but very quickly I decided that if I wanted to get this done within 2 weeks, I was going to have to cut some corners. One of those corners being the dialogue system, as it's just a field I have no experience in, and I just kind of got a little overwhelmed with it and didn't want to spend half of the development time debugging a messy system I made. Save it for a different day, Instead, I turned to a plugin I was kind of familiar with, Dialogic 2 Alpha. Now, Dialogic 2 is pretty neat at making dialogue under specific circumstances. The thing is, Dialogic 2 is very, very early on in development, so there are a lot of parts that you kind of have to finagle around with until they work well enough. So even while trying to avoid programming, you've still got to program. I like Dialogic 2 though. Hey, if there are any Dialogic 2 devs listening, do you know if it's possible to save the position of a timeline and start another timeline and save that one as well, and then return to the point where you saved the first timeline after you've saved the second one? Not at certain points, but just at any piece of the dialogue, while still keeping it within one save thing, you know, like if you had two dialogues running at the same time. Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, it's kind of unrelated, but I've been trying to work on loopholes for this because, anyway, interactions are next. Typically, you'd want to do a raycast for wherever the player is facing, but I just used a secondary 2D for the player and checked if it was overlapping with other objects. The programming of this game is undoubtedly jank, but because I had spent some time in the past crying over mistakes I didn't realize were mistakes and endless forum searches for very obscure and stupid things that I accidentally did to myself, most of what I needed to program was pretty straightforward. People are not kidding that programming is a language you've got to learn. So many specific circumstances create this magic we call a video game. But oh my god, so many tears. Maybe less so here, but if you've never programmed or aren't a big fan of it, it can be very, very rough. However, it's also needed to create the awesome experiences we play. Of course, if I was only programming, I think I'd have lost it anyway. So that brings me to a different challenging part. I don't know what it constitutes to be an artist, but I do like making things that might resemble art. I draw for funsies, and I also enjoy making music. But when you've got 2 weeks to put together bare minimum 9 songs for each of the areas and all the assets, things can get rough. Things can get very, very rough. To be honest, the music was my favorite part. I would have spent so long on each of the songs, but I tried to limit my time to not, I've only got 2 weeks for this. And that's in between all of life's other hurdles as well as the other things I need to make for this game. Most of the songs I composed completely within the 2 weeks. The Fountain theme was the first one I made using the synth I edited to sound like this dream I had about a first-person Silent Hill game where you played as a butler. And anyways, it was pretty simple, but I think it fit. Mask aesthetic and this cool shader I found for the background, it gave a very dreamlike vibe, so I kind of wanted to make it sound like it was something you'd hear in a Yume Nikki. The prologue song was actually a unused song from a previous unfinished game that was going to play in the tutorial as well, strangely to give similar but reverse vibes. You see, while I wanted to make a lot of original music, that also takes a while, so I remixed some of my previous songs that I've made just to keep it within the time limits. Where things got tough though was the art. Obviously it was going to be pixel art, but I literally had no idea how you're supposed to lay that out in a spreadsheet. So I looked at an example, like I said before, with the character, and basically copied how they did it. And it mostly worked. I'm no professional, but I can make a spreadsheet work for me. Not really, but I learned a few tricks throughout this experience, such as being able to layer pixel art instead of making a unique tile for every single instance of every graphic you want to use. For example, having leaves on green versus gray, etc. The problem with that was that if I wanted to randomize it, I kind of had to do it myself because it uses the paint bucket tool to make it look more random naturally with its own programming, whatever. The characters, aside from the protagonist, I sketched out on a paper and then roughly tried to translate them over to a sprite. Overall, I think I got a little sloppy with it, but it's fun, it's a challenge. I'd love to work with more artists in the future and on future games. I think it'll turn into a need, and hey, it's probably a good skill to work with teams. But if you're looking for music, hey, I can make something for you. I mean, I make all kinds of music. I'll do it for free. Please, I just want to make music. Please! So I figured out how to do the basic stuff, and now it was making a comprehensive game. That's the challenge. Coming up with 9 different types of puzzles was kinda tough, and I think if I had more time, I'd definitely refine it. But what's done is done. Okay, I could go back, but I don't know. Should I just leave it be or not, or I don't know. Now here's the thing. Everybody says take the time you think you'll take with your game and double it, but truly, that is what you have to do. Game devs say polish always takes the longest, and honestly, they are so right. Oh my god, this was ridiculous. I spent like 9,000 hours trying to fix small things. I had to leave other things as well, like unbalanced audio, bugs and glitches. It's like you have to reverse brute force method your own work because oh my god. It was difficult to put the pieces together, and unfortunately, everything went so wrong. Okay, that's not true, but there'd be random bugs that I'd have to just sidestep with different code instead of solving the problem because, god damn it, it was insane. But I did it, and I finished it. The thing is, the game isn't perfect. Far from it. In fact, it's closer to not perfect than half perfect, so we're pretty low here. Like, you probably can't beat this game if you experience color blindness or hardness of hearing, but I did it. And it gave me a feeling of satisfaction that carried my shift at work, and also boosted my soul a little bit. So then people played it. I don't think anybody's beaten it. I think I may have made it too hard, but I tried to make it easier, I swear. There are 2 puzzles I'm sure just needed one more hint, those being the amphitheater, the exclamation point is equal to the interaction key, and the hideaway, where you have to start from the center of the puzzle for it to count as complete. But I feel roughly 85% confident the puzzles are reasonably solvable. Seriously though, if you can beat it, please let me know or post it in like the HIO comments or something. Nobody I know has been able to do it. They've been able to get close. I mean, like, they're solvable. They're not all unsolvable. People have been able to get close on most puzzles. It's just kind of tough to introduce concepts when the game is about figuring out said concepts, so it's kind of weird. Anyway, that being said, the people who solved some of the puzzles seem pretty proud of themselves for figuring it out, which makes me very happy. Sure, it took me about a week longer than I thought it would, but doggone it, I did it. I made a game, and it's really, really real. They say once you get some momentum, you want to stay on a roll, so I think it's about time I start game number 2 of this summer. The week-long escapade that may be a nightmare, but I guess we'll see. Making stuff is really difficult, and when you're learning, it can be really difficult to get that proud feeling. That feeling of accomplishment, that fleeting high of proving your capabilities. With a video game, the act in itself feels like one of the most daunting tasks. So once you finish one, no matter how polished or unpolished, no matter how good or bad, it feels euphoric to get there. And I cannot recommend that enough. So please, join me. Let's make games. Doesn't matter your skill level anywhere. Just remember your SMART goals and have some patience for yourself and your dreams.